all my life I've been drawing. So, in fact, I used to always say to friends that actually education came in the way for me. So all I wanted to do was to draw. So when an opportunity came up to go to university and to study art, I thought, well, where do I go? And what happened in those days, I'm talking about the early 80s, South Africa, we had, of course, our racial separated laws, and in order to study fine arts, which I wanted to study, I had to apply for government permission to go to a white university. So in the early 80s, I went to Wits University, got government permission, and went to this university, and it was quite a interesting time for me. I think they were not used to me, and I was obviously not used to being in this environment. But it became a very impactful period in my education as an artist. My mum always sort of tells me the story that when I was probably about 3 years old, I think, or two, well, I can't really remember, but she was the one that initiated us, my brother and I actually, to sit and draw. So we spent our days, our very early days, just drawing. And then watching my dad, who was a science teacher and a biology teacher, he would come home with all these sort of diagrams of biology and physics books. And so these books became almost an inspiration. And I remember looking at these old books that had these transparencies, and you would open them up and reveal different layers of the body. So all of that started my impulse to draw. And I don't know, sometimes I think you draw because you have to, in many ways. All South Africans, in some ways, had problems growing up in apartheid. And I remember as a young child, my first instinct growing up in Port Shepstone was hearing the sirens and my parents rushing home because they said, look, we are not allowed to be on the street. So those very early memories really started to inform me and tell me, hold on, there's something wrong in the society. What is actually happening? And then subsequently, I was thinking about this a couple of weeks ago. I remember going to town and watching a whole group of white South Africans chasing one young black man. And growing up, you got a sense there's something is really weird in society. You go to the beach, and the beach was only designated whites only or blacks only, and you would look around and you see on the far end where the white section was a much nicer beach with a pool, and your section was near, an outlet sewage tank type of thing. So you got aware of these things. And as a young student, I started getting really involved. Largely as an impulse from my parents, because my dad was very active in the Anglican Church. And we started to realize, hold on, we need to start changing things. So my dad, as a teacher, was constantly questioning, the institutions that he was in. And as a result, as my brothers and I, and including my sisters, all got involved in some form of activism. As a result, when I got to university, I was busy reading some really interesting books on Fanon and things like that, and they discovered these books in my in my locker, and the university authorities thought, okay, they threatened to actually kick me out because they thought, I'm here to study art but not politics. What was really troubling me as a young artist was watching all of this. We were getting involved in protests, getting involved in the street actions, and looking at people were starting to rise up. A certain level of critical consciousness was occurring. And at the same time, the state was coming down very, very hard on people. And now, as an artist influenced by Goya and influenced by, of course, the romantic French painters, I wanted to start recording what I saw. At the same time, what was interesting is that the police ran a law because of the state of emergency saying, look, you're not allowed to record, photograph, or even draw the police doing their normal duties. So in a way, it started me on a whole series of work called the Metamorphosis series, and where I started to draw policemen stripped of their uniforms and actually, charging people. And what happened was, I had my house, my apartment full of these drawings, And then one day, by some chance, some policemen were chasing some people on the streets, and just it was a crazy coincidence, but they walked into my apartment, saw all of these drawings on the walls, and started to rip it all apart and asked me, "What am I doing? Why am I doing this?" And the strange part also was that at that stage, I had a friend who was very actively involved in politics, who was actually hiding in my house, and so when they found him, they actually took him away and were more concerned about him rather than actually pursuing my drawings. But in the end, of course, my drawings were destroyed. I was fortunate when I started to really have a chance to move out of South Africa by first getting an opportunity in the early 90s, where I went to Amsterdam and did some work in an art residency. But my real trip out of South Africa had actually started around 10 years ago. And now I'm more based in London, specifically West Sussex. I'm an artist, and at the same time I'm a carer, and I'm always quite confused about. Well, I should say not confused necessarily, but I think as an artist you start learning to understand your role. Your role is not just simply about making images, but it's also coming to terms with what are other elements and what are the challenges that are thrown at you in life. These dual roles, including my background, definitely do feed into my work. It makes me start questioning issues around how we make art. Because of all of those roles, from being a student activist to being a carer, is really about communication. And communication to the point of how do you affirm yourself, and at the same time how you can become anonymous in that communication. I started out when I was young, influenced a lot by Goya and a lot of the romantic painters and Caravaggio, like any young artist. And during the struggle in South Africa, the figurative element had some resonance. But once things changed in our country, I found that I needed to find a language that was a bit more complex, or at least complicated the issue for me. And so abstraction became almost a good place to start, a place where I could be more reflective, more contemplative, and mostly introspective. The paintings that I make now is reflective of a long journey. In fact, about 15 years or so of just simply working in monochrome or ink. And I found that I like the basic, almost like like the traditional cave painters that you saw in the Drakensberg or in France. But I like the core value of just simply working with ink and paper. Very simple, basic ingredients. And the action of drawing, the action of communicating with such basic techniques. I'm actually quite excited about my way forward now, and I think I've come to a stage where the last 15 years of working in monochrome has allowed me to understand color, or understand composition, form and shape, and it's given me a chance now to really expand and if not explode with color. So it's in many ways I think I feel much more grounded, and I always sort of take a quote from I think another painter who said this, that painting is like old age, there's no shortcuts.